What if your child's biggest career competition in 2030 isn't another student? It's AI. And here is the question every parent should be asking today. Will the education you are planning for your child in 2026 still give them an advantage when they graduate in 2030? Because that world is already being built. AI is changing classrooms, it's changing assessments, it's changing how students learn. And most importantly, it is changing the skills the employer will pay for. So if your child could graduate around 2030, don't wait till the university applications begin. Start thinking earlier about international exposure, career opportunities, and where they may eventually want to build their future. Because by the time the applications begin, you may already be starting too late. Global education planning today is no longer just about choosing a foreign university. It's also about planning what comes after university. Think about education 10 years ago. Memorization mattered. Degrees were a differentiator. And a strong academic record could open a lot of doors. But AI is changing that equation. The World Economic Forum estimates that by 2030, around 170 million new jobs could be created. At the same time, 92 million jobs could be displaced. That's still a net gain of 78 million jobs globally. But here is the bigger point. Nearly 40% of the skills required for the jobs are expected to change by 2030. So the question is no longer which degree should my child get. The better question is which environment will help my child remain valuable when the job market changes. Because the future may not belong to students who simply know the best. It may belong to those who can think, adapt, collaborate, use AI, solve problems, and operate across borders. The OECD has now published frameworks around AI literacy because students won't just need to know how to use AI. They will need to question it, evaluate it, and use it responsibly. And that leads to the next question. Where will your child get the right environment to build the skills? Because preparing for an AI-driven future isn't about what they will study. It's also about where they study, who they learn with, and what kind of global exposure they get. And that is where overseas education enters the conversation. Now, does studying abroad automatically guarantee success? Absolutely not. But the right international education can give your child exposure to something increasingly valuable. Different markets, different technologies, different people and culture, different way of thinking. Imagine your child graduating with more than just a degree. They've studied in an environment where AI is part of learning. They've worked with students from different countries, built international networks, and gained exposure beyond the Indian market. That's the conversation families should be having. Not simply where can my child get admission, but where my child can build relevance for the next decade. And there is another part parents often overlook. Getting your child into foreign university is one challenge. Giving them the ability to stay and build a career there is becoming another. Look at Canada. New international student arrivals fell from around 293,000 in 2024 to just 115,000 in 2025. That's a drop of more than 60%. Now look at US. During the peak May to August admission season, F1 visas issued to Indian students fell from nearly 59,000 in 2024 to just over 22,000 in 2025. That's a drop of 62%. Visa applicants are also facing expanded online presence screening. So getting a student visa is becoming tighter and less predictable. But getting the visa is only first hurdle. What happens after graduation? In the US, many international graduates move from OPT towards the H-1B system. For financial year 2026, USCA has received nearly 344,000 H-1B applications, but only around 119,000 were selected. And even after getting an H-1B, the uncertainty continues. For many Indians, the green card wait can stretch for decades. And if your child loses their job, they may eventually have to leave the US. Canada's post-study route has also tightened. There are now language requirements and field of study restrictions for certain postgraduate work permit applicants. And even after gaining Canadian work experience, permanent residency is not guaranteed. Express entry has become highly competitive, which means families need to ask a much bigger question. If my child studies there, is there a path to stay there? Because 4 years and crores spent on international education can end with a great degree, but no clear path to stay, work, and build a career in that country. That's why immigration and settlement planning should not begin in the final semester. It should begin when you are choosing the university and the country. Depending on the family and the destination, the pathway could eventually come through skilled employment, investment, or other qualifying immigration route. The objective is not simply to invest in a visa, it is to build optionality. So when your child graduates in 2030, they are not starting from zero and asking, how can I stay? You have already spent the previous few years understanding what pathway could allow them to stay. And that is where starting early can make a very big difference. If your child is going to graduate around 2030, don't think of 2030 as a starting point. Treat it as a deadline. 2026, start planning the university, the finances, and the immigration pathway. 2027, move into applications, documentation, funding, and execution. 2028 to 2029, build and secure the right residency or long-term settlement pathway where eligible. And then 2030, your child graduates into a global economy that has already changed, ready to build a future without the constant fear of having to leave the country. See the difference. The smartest families aren't waiting for 2030. They are working backwards from it. Because ultimately, this isn't just about sending your child overseas. It's about giving them options. Options to study, options to work, options to build, options to live in a country where their skill may have stronger opportunities. And most importantly, the option to make decisions from a position of certainty, not pressure. The biggest mistake may not be choosing the wrong university. It may be starting the conversation too late. Because by the time your child is ready to graduate, thousands of other students will already be competing for the same job, the same visas, and the same opportunities. Families who start early have one enormous advantage: time. Time to research, time to build capital, time to understand immigration pathways, time to compare countries, and time to change the strategy if the world changes. So if your child could be graduating in 2030, don't ask, what should we do when the time comes? Ask, what should we start doing today? Because the future of education is changing. Future of work is changing. And your child's global future deserves more than a last-minute decision. Start planning before the opportunity becomes urgent. If you want to understand how education, investment, and global immigration pathways could fit into your family's long-term strategy, subscribe to Global Moves and speak with a qualified immigration professional about your options. 2030 is closer than it looks. Plan the destination, build the pathway, start today.